After the disappointing box office gross of Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood, director John Carl Buechler began developing a follow-up which reprised the character of Tina Shepard, again facing off against Jason Voorhees after her release from an insane asylum. Paramount, however, opted to assign the project of a follow-up to writer-director Rob Hayden, marking his debut feature in his 1989 film Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan.
Let them fight.
You're a wizard, Harry.
You're gonna need a bigger boat. I'll be back.
Death has come to your little township.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Chills and Thrills. My name is Connor Dunham and I'm back with Chris to continue the Friday the 13th franchise. So, Chris, today we are doing Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, or what a lot of fans say is Jason Takes a Cruise, Jason Takes a Boat, or
Jason Takes Titanic.
yeah, things like that. He doesn't really take New York. A lot of this wasn't really filmed in New York. It was filmed in
Vancouver, right?
yeah, it's what exactly.
Yeah.
That's another title that I've heard is Jason Takes Vancouver.
Yeah,
So,
a lot of Vancouver standing in for New York City.
yes, the little we get of New York City is phenomenal. The shot in Times Square and stuff. But what do you think about this film? How'd you feel on your rewatch?
Yeah, so it's one of those where, in the same way that sometimes you rewatch a movie that you have fond memories of and you're expecting something really good, and then it can let you down, and you're like, oh yeah, I now I'm realizing how not so amazing it is. Rewatching this one, I was expecting it to be really, really rough, and it is pretty rough. But I was pleasantly surprised at some of the splashes of quality or fun that it had. It's not one of the better entries in the series. It's definitely one of the worst entries, but it manages to have a few things that still made it a fun watch. So it's lower tier, but it has its highlights for sure.
Absolutely, I agree with you on that. The first 50 minutes of it kind of drag a little bit, but once they get off that boat and they get to New York and things get rolling, I mean, there's some good kills on the boat. There's some good little like action sequences and stuff. But once they actually get to New York and Jason's there and kind of starts chasing and stalking, and that's where we get into the fun stuff. There's some good shots. There's some good one takes. It gets fun there.
Yeah, it has its, there. It's not phoned in. As some people might refer to some of these entries as generic or phoned in, whatever. This doesn't feel terribly phoned in. It just feels compromised. I understand the script was more of a 2/3 New York, 1/3 boat, and they ended up having to make a movie that was more, 70% boat, 30% New York, and because money and budgets and time and things of that, it's difficult to just film in New York City, so or Manhattan rather, and so it's so I understand it, but you have to judge the movie as what it is, and it's like, well, they're trying, but it's still a weaker entry.
Yeah, as the kind of the budgets got higher for the films and the box offices kept declining, you can only offer up so much money to the next film,
Yeah,
like thinking that it's going to possibly fail even worse than the previous film. So there was a lot in this film that would have been great to see that was cut, and we'll talk about some of that a little here in a little bit.
yeah, that's the difficulty of they were trying to find new ways to kind of new spins to put on the property or new things to do, whether it be a little more cinematic with part 6. They have like car crashes and things like that, and then the telekinetic stuff with 7, and then going to Manhattan here. They were trying to find things to freshen up and add some pizzazz to the series, but that stuff all costs money, so you're going to be spending a lot more than you would if you just had a couple of cabins in the woods, and then so you're getting compromises. And so then a movie like Jason Takes Manhattan doesn't deliver enough on the promise for it to kind of spike the sales, so it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, it sure is. And I mean, I'll talk about it in fun facts, but this film probably could have been one of the better or best entries in the series or the franchise if we would have got what the director originally intended. But I'll give you some background and information on the film first.
Hmm.
Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan is a 1989 American slasher film written and directed by Rob Hayden or Heaton.
I read it as Hedden, but I mean 6 in one, half dozen in the other. I don't know.
Okay. And starring Jensen Daggett, Scott Reeves, Peter Mark Richmond, and Kane Hodder reprising his role as Jason Voorhees. It is a sequel to Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood from 1988, and the 8th installment in the Friday the 13th franchise. Set 1 year after the events of The New Blood, the film follows Jason as he stalks a group of high school graduates on a ship en route to New York City. It was the final film in the series to be distributed by Paramount Pictures in the United States until 2009, with the subsequent Friday the 13th installments being distributed by New Line Cinema. Filming took place primarily in Vancouver, British Columbia, with additional photography in New York City's Times Square and in Los Angeles. At the time of its production, Jason Takes Manhattan was the most expensive film in the series, and it received substantial attention for its initial marketing campaign featuring Jason Voorhees slashing through the I Love New York logo with a knife, which was later retracted after the New York City Tourism Committee filed a complaint against Paramount. Released on July 28, 1989, the film was panned by critics and fans for its plot and the humor, and as well as failure to live up to its premise, as Jason does not arrive in New York until about the final 20 to 25 minutes of the film. So there's a little background on Part 8.
Yeah, and I believe at 100 minutes it is the longest of the original 8 by a pretty substantial margin. At least, most of them are in the sort of 85 to 89 minute range. And you feel it for sure. You feel it for sure, which is a little unfortunate, but what are you going to do?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, as we said, it drags a little bit, but I mean, I
Yeah,
still like this movie.
100 minutes is still pretty short. Like by modern standards, a lot of movies that would come out and they were 100 minutes, you'd say, "Oh wow, that's pretty short." But for this franchise and the type of movie that these are, the kind of quick pace they have, 100 minutes is like that's like the 2 hour epic, So
Yeah, when besides this one, I believe the first one is the longest at 95 minutes, and like you said, all the others are about 85, 87, 88, and that's including main titles and ending credits.
yeah, and the 5 minute recap of the last movie and
Yeah,
all that other stuff that they put in there.
absolutely. Why don't we go ahead and get into a trailer on Friday the 13th, Jason Takes Manhattan. Chris will read us off a plot synopsis, and we'll go into some numbers, and I got some good fun facts for us here, and we'll continue on.
Friday the 13th, Part 8. Jason Takes Manhattan. Now, New York has a new problem.
While aboard a houseboat on Crystal Lake, teenager Jim Miller tells his girlfriend Susie the legend of Jason Voorhees before playing a prank on her with a hockey mask, similar to Jason's old mask, and a prop knife. The boat's anchor damages some underwater cables that shock Jason's corpse, who was seemingly killed in the previous film, and revives him. He sneaks on board, takes the mask, and kills Jim with a harpoon gun before impaling Susie. The next morning, the SS Lazarus is ready to set sail for New York City with a graduating senior class from Lakeview High School, chaperoned by biology teacher Dr. Charles McCullough and English teacher Colleen Van Dusen. Van Dusen brings McCullough's niece Rennie along for the trip despite her aquaphobia, much to his chagrin. Jason sneaks on board and kills rock star wannabe J.J. Jarrett with her guitar. That night, a young boxer who lost his match to champion Julius Gaw is killed by Jason in the ship's sauna. Rennie, searching for her pet border collie Toby, discovers prom queen Tamara Mason and her friend Eva Watanabe doing drugs. McCullough nearly catches them moments later, and Tamara pushes Rennie overboard, believing she told on them. She then uses video student Wayne Weber to record McCullough in a compromising situation with her, but rejects Wayne's advances afterwards. Jason kills Tamara with a shard of broken mirror after she showers. Rennie sees visions of a young Jason in different forms throughout the ship. Jason kills Captain Robertson and his first mate. Rennie's boyfriend and Captain Robertson's son, Sean, discovers them and tells the others before calling for an emergency. Eva finds Tamara's body and flees. Jason chases Eva into the disco room where he strangles her to death on the dance floor. The students agree to search for Jason while McCullough decides that the deckhand is responsible. However, the deckhand is found with a fire axe in his back. Jason tosses student Miles Wolfe into the radio transmitter tower to his death, and Julius is knocked overboard. In the hold of the ship, Wayne comes upon JJ's body and is thrown into an electrical box by Jason. Wayne's corpse catches fire and causes the ship to take on water. With the other students that were left in the disco room seemingly dead, McCullough, Van Dusen, Rennie, and Sean escape aboard a life raft and discover that Toby and Julius are still alive. They row to New York City, where Jason stalks them through the streets. Rennie is kidnapped by a pair of drug addicts, and the group splits up to find help. Julius fights Jason on a rooftop but becomes exhausted after Jason does not go down after a series of punches, and then gets decapitated by a single punch from Jason. Rennie escapes from Jason when he kills the punks that kidnapped her. She runs into Sean, and they reunite with the teachers from the NYPD before Jason kills the officer who is helping them. Rennie crashes a police car after a vision of Jason distracts her. Van Dusen is incinerated in the car when it explodes, and it is revealed that McCullough is responsible for Rennie's fear of water, having pushed her into the lake as a child. They leave him behind, and Jason drowns him in a barrel of toxic waste. Jason chases Rennie and Sean into the subway, where Sean incapacitates Jason by pushing him onto the third rail. When Jason revives, he chases them through Times Square to a diner and then into the sewers, where they encounter a worker. He warns them that the sewers will be flooded with toxic waste at midnight. Jason appears and kills the worker before knocking Sean unconscious. Rennie throws a vat of toxic waste onto Jason's face, which instantly starts to melt. She and Sean climb a ladder as Jason staggers after them. The sewers flood, and Jason is reminded of his childhood drowning and vomits water. The waste water overcomes Jason, washing his body away. When the water recedes, Rennie once again sees her vision of Jason as an unconscious child for the final time, finally conquering her longtime fear. Sean and Rennie return to the street, reuniting with Rennie's dog Toby in Times Square.
And that is absolutely the important part, that the dog survived.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, love it. Great reading. I'll give you some quick numbers since I have fun facts that we'll probably have way more discussion on the fun facts. There's some good ones in there.
Sure thing.
So Friday the 13th Part 8 had a budget of $5 million and a box office of $14.3 million. So Chris has our inflation numbers for us.
Yeah, Wikipedia listed the budget as between 5.1 and 5.5 million. That 5.1 million would be the equivalent of about 12.9 million today. So you're looking at a budget of about 13 million. And that box office today would be about 36.2 million. So you're looking at the better part of tripling the budget at the box office, which again, not a bad return, not great, not a bad return, certainly diminishing returns, but, still a profitable venture. Just not profitable enough.
Well, when you're 8 movies in, you can only do so much and do so much different with him being at a camp and then coming back to a different camp and chasing counselors and teenagers, and now you're on a boat and going to Manhattan, and there's only so much you can do. And I think that when New Line took over, I I, I mean, I feel like the next film definitely they took a swing with the next film, and some people say it landed, some people say it didn't. But with the last film that Paramount gave us, I mean, what really could you do? I mean, you had to do something different.
Especially when you're creating them at essentially a pace of one a year. I mean, you go from the first one in 1980 to the eighth one in 1989, so they missed 1 year essentially. So yeah, there's only so much, or 2 years rather, whichever. But there's only so much you can do when you're just cranking them out, cranking them out, cranking them out. You're gonna get audience fatigue. They don't release an Avengers movie every year. So there you go.
Yeah, they just got 9 different Marvels per year that
Yeah,
happen
which
to
is
this.
which that's wearing thin too. The only one I've seen in the last couple of years has been Deadpool and Wolverine. So there you go.
That's one thing I'll agree with, how James Cameron is doing the avatars right now. He's like 4 or 5 years
Yeah,
apart, and
spacing
they're
them apart
are
very
huge.
well. Hey, look, I low key am one of the biggest fans of James Cameron's Avatar movies. I love those movies to death. So maybe one day we'll be talking about those.
Oh, yeah. I definitely wanna get to him because what does he have? 3 more coming out, so he'll have 5 total. I've liked the 2 so far, so we'll
Yeah,
definitely have to get to those.
sounds good to me.
Um, Friday the 13th Part 8 is rated a 4.5 out of 10 on IMDb, an 11% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, 14% rating on Metacritic. Our Google users saved it again with 77% of Google users liked this film.
Yeah,
Jason, here's another good one. Is Jason is on screen for 14 minutes and 26 seconds, or about 14% of the film. So we get, this film's about 10, 12 minutes longer than your average Friday the 13th, but we also get, compared to 8 or 9 minutes of Jason, we get 14 and a half minutes of Jason on screen. So that helps a lot. And then we also get 19 deaths in this film, averaging out to one every 5.2 minutes. So
that's not so bad. That's not so bad.
no, those last two numbers will help save a film. What we do get of Jason in this is good. Well, we'll go into how he looks and stuff a little later, but
Yeah, I might have
I'll
some
keep
hot.
that.
I might have some hot takes on that. I might have some hot takes on
I'll be ready for him in about a half hour. No.
that.
I'll give you some fun facts on the film because this, what they originally planned for this film, again, in my opinion, would have been phenomenal. But I'll get to them here. At the time of its production, Jason Takes Manhattan was the most expensive film in the series, which we've talked about. How most expensive film, lowest box office, which is one of the reasons that Paramount kind of shipped them off the New Line, and also for some reason, as much money as these made, Paramount was embarrassed to have their name attached to these films. And it's like, if it's making me money, I don't know if I'm gonna mind continuing to make these films.
Yeah, we were in a different kind of era of America where there was still this sort of you know stuff that was sort of sleazy, or and they had like the satanic panic, and like heavy metal was of the devil and things like that. So these movies that were sort of glorifying violence and nudity and things like that, there was a lot of pushback and pearl clutching over it, and so while today you can be like, oh, why would a movie studio have any problem with what kind of horror movies they were producing? But back then there was this whole other cultural element to it that was like, oh, this is problematic. So
And nowadays you can damn near show whatever you want on screen when it comes to nudity or anything like that. But if you say, the retarded word or faggot or something in a movie, no offense to anyone out there, but that's like a sacred no-no right now. But you can show a any body part you want and get away with it. It's insane.
Yeah. The words are violence. We don't got. It's a little nonsense.
Yep, I agree. It's a much different time than in the late '80s. I'll continue on with this. Jason Takes Manhattan grossed $14.3 million at the domestic box office, making it the poorest performing film in the Friday the 13th series to date. We kind of just touched on that.
I like the emphasis on poorest.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the poorest one to date still. Even with inflation numbers, I think it's still the poorest one to date.
The poorest.
After the disappointing box office gross of Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood, in 1988, director John Carl Buechler began developing a follow-up which reprised the character of Tina Shepard, again facing off against Jason after her release from an insane asylum. Meanwhile, Lar Park Lincoln, who had portrayed Tina Shepard, co-wrote with her husband an alternative screenplay which had Tina working as a psychologist for troubled girls. Lincoln's co-star in The New Blood, Kevin Spertas, also wrote a screenplay which recast the events of The New Blood into a long dream with his character as the killer. Paramount, however, opted to assign the project of a follow-up to director Rob Hayden, marking his film director debut in this film, Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan.
Yeah, it's interesting. These movies always seem to have these much more wild concepts for sequels that never were. I know we talked so much about how we wanted the Part 6 director to return and do another one, but he at one point pitched a Cheech and Chong meets Jason type of movie, and it's like, oh my gosh, that sounds like a straight up goofy comedy. So it's like there's always these wild pitches for sequels that don't happen, and they always go a little bit more, like for all the hate that these movies get for like, oh, versus a psychic or going to New York, that's so wild, that's so stupid. It's like some of these other stories were just as wild in some cases.
Yeah, I read up on that. The one that the John Carl Buechler began developing like a follow up with Tina in an insane asylum, and like Jason like kind of finding her and tracking her down and whatnot. But I'm like that just like I'm glad they didn't decide to go that way, because that's more of like a Michael Myers, like Laurie Strode thing. Like,
yeah, Jason kind of stalking down the hallways of a big interior building just doesn't seem right. Jason's a sort of outdoorsman kind of a killer. He's in the woods, he's in the cabins, he's on the lake. Jason in like a office building that doesn't hit the same.
No, not at all. And like I said, it's a concept you might like to see one time, but once you see it, in my mind, I probably would have been disappointed. Granted, John Carl Buechler, like the special effects and stuff he does or did before his passing, were great. So, like, anytime you can see Jason, you want to see him.
Yeah, for sure.
The alternate concept for this film was to place Voorhees in a large city such as New York. The director, Hayden, commented everything about New York was going to be completely exploited and milked. There was going to be a tremendous scene on the Brooklyn Bridge, a boxing match in Madison Square Garden. Jason would go through department stores. He'd go through Times Square. He would go into a Broadway play, and he'd even crawl onto the top of the Statue of Liberty and dive off. And I read some of these, and I was like, you're probably looking at another $5 million added to your budget to do all this, but it would have been phenomenal to see some of those crazy ideas come true.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. It's like if they'd cut the check for $10 million and done this and really made it that big of a production, people would have turned up. That's the kind of stuff that people would have shown up for. Jason on the Statue of Liberty, on the Golden Gate Bridge. They were going to be in Madison Square Garden. Like, you do all of those things like that. That's stuff you can load with the trailers. That's stuff you can put on posters. That's stuff you can get the reviewers talking about. Like, you feel like that's the kind of elevating it to an event that would have likely yielded much better box office results.
Yeah, and I mean, if you see in a trailer today, like Jason walking into the theater of a play, and everybody kind of just turns and like looks at him, and it's almost like a comedic moment. Like, what the hell is this guy doing? Like, does he know that we're like there's a play going on? Or and
Yeah.
you could just massively increase the body count. Like he just starts throwing and chucking people and
Yeah.
killing them, and like it'd be an insane like scene to see.
Yeah, and one of the best shots in the movie is him in Times Square, and that sort of the camera sort of revolving around him, and clearly, the director wanted the movie to be loaded with moments like that of Jason against the iconography of New York City, and like you put 5, 6, 7, 8 more moments like that in the movie, and it becomes this much more entertaining film.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I got two more for you, and they kind of run together. But the New York cook who Jason throws into the mirror behind the counter in the diner scene is portrayed by Ken Kersinger, who played Jason in Freddy vs. Jason. And then,
Mhm.
according to the Crystal Lake Memories book, Ken Kersinger actually also doubled as Jason in a couple of shots in this film, technically making him the second person to play Jason in more than one film. So
Yeah,
I did know that fact from watching special features, but I thought for anyone who
yeah,
doesn't know that, I'd throw it in here.
yeah. And from what I understand, it's one of the stunts is when he's hit by the car. So that's one of them where it's Ken, and also apparently because there was a lot of this movie that was happening like in Vancouver. They originally were going to because Ken Kersinger, I think, was the stunt coordinator or stunt supervisor on this film, and he was originally going to be offered the role of Jason because some of the producers assumed that Kane Hodder wouldn't want to return, and so then when like word got around, like Kane expressed his enthusiasm for wanting to return, so that's kind of how it became that Kane became the first guy to play it more than once, which is kind of a neat story.
And I
So
love it.
yeah, so we were, but it's interesting because we were close to getting Ken as Kane back in part 8.
I love it because Kane Hodder seems to always be down for anything. There's very few stunts that he won't do, and if he's not doing it, it's usually the like director's choice or something, because he's down to be hit him with a chair, fall through stairs, have a roof collapse on him. He will jump out a
Yeah,
window. He's one of those stuntmen that'll do damn near whatever you want him to, unless the director, like the production unit, says no.
yeah, and I just like his body language as Jason. To me, that's just the vibe. That's just the feel of it. It's his body language just kind of lands the best for me.
Yep, we talked about it in the previous episode, like the breathing, and how he turns his head first
Mhm.
before he moves his body in the direction he's gonna go. Like he's very aware as Jason. He does a phenomenal job in all of these.
Yeah, it's a performance, and you love to see it.
All right, that's all I have for you on the fun facts. We got a lot missing from this movie that we could have had, but I'll go straight into asking you who your favorite character was of the film.
Yeah, so I'll have like an A choice and a B choice. My favorite character is actually the character of Julius, just because so many things about his character on this rewatch uh were the sort of pleasant surprises about the movie. And we'll get into that in some of these other categories, but Julius just kind of steals some moments and steals some scenes in a lot of different ways. And so I got to go with Julius as my favorite amongst the female characters. My sort of like my dark horse, my sort of unsung hero, actually like Eva, who is played by Kelly Hu, and she or Hugh maybe is how it's pronounced, but she went on to play characters like Lady Deathstrike in X-Men 2. She was the female lead in the first Scorpion King movie with The Rock, So she went on to have some fairly major roles in some other movies, but I always liked her because being as one of the side characters, she's one of the few characters that sort of, you always have your final girl who has those sort of typical tropes. But amongst the other characters, Eva kind of felt like the only other character that kind of, in another scenario, she could have been the final girl of this kind of movie. She was kind of she didn't seem like outside of the drug use a little bit, she wasn't really a bad kid, so to speak. So you could have seen a scenario where maybe she could have made it out. So those were the two characters that stood out the most for me.
Absolutely. I chose Julius as well as my favorite character. He was just he's the boxing guy, so he's like the athlete, and I mean, you can tell like from statements that characters make in the film that like he's like a ladies' man, like the girls want him. He's undefeated in boxing, so he's kind of a badass. But he's humble, but then when they think that like stuff's going crazy and whatnot on the ship, he kind of goes up to the teacher and he's like, "School is out, McCullough." Okay, like so he's kind of like
That
a rebel character. Like,
that is one of my favorite. As a kid, that was just one of the lines that I liked the most. Obviously, when you're still in grade school and you're in middle school and you hear a line, "School is out, McCullough." Any scenes in movies where when you're a student, when you're a kid, any scenes where the students just talk crap to the teachers and mouth off to the teachers is always fun. So I always liked that as a kid.
yeah, he was just like a rebel character. He was gonna do his own thing, and if he was gonna go out, he was gonna go out on his own terms. And I mean, I love it. But I mean, Kelly Hu, absolutely. I mean, as a young kid, I had the hots for her, and then
Oh, she's gorgeous. She's
yeah,
gorgeous. I'll be the first one to say it.
as a as you get older and the Scorpion King came out, she aged very well and has continued to age well. I mean, she's very gorgeous. I mean, I like her in this one. The little bit we do get to see her, I loved her in the Scorpion King. But you definitely could see her like when I was younger. I was just like, okay, Rennie's like this quiet, like she's scared of the water and stuff like that. But it's like you could easily see exchanging her character and Kelly Hu and putting Kelly Hu as the main girl and like having
Absolutely.
her survive because in my opinion she was the prettiest girl in this film, and
Yep.
usually she's your final girl who's going to survive, but because you had the kind of trampy girl, but there wasn't too much of that. But I absolutely loved her in this film, the little that we did get her.
Agreed. Agreed.
I'll go into my favorite score for the film. We had to look these up on YouTube again. There wasn't like an actual soundtrack to find anywhere on Spotify or Pandora that I found. So the track that I ended up choosing had a couple different names to it. It was Wayne Fry's Jason Kills, Cabin Flashback, The Galley, and Jump Ship. And it was like a mixture of a couple different soundtracks in the film, clearly. So because this isn't an official soundtrack of the film, but when they all run together, it's like a 5.5 minute track, and it sounds good. It makes the film. There's a lot of like upbeat, but still like scary like themes with a lot of tension in them and like chords and stuff like that. So I like music and like scores for films that are very instrumented. Maybe.
I'm not. I'm not sure. Instrumentational, electronic.
I like strings, put it that way.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Fair enough.
But yeah, and that one sounds like this.
Yeah. I mean, I will ditto that. Like, there's not. This is. The soundtrack didn't really. It doesn't really have a lot of standouts, and a lot of it's kind of in that kind of recycled. I dig some of the tunes they play relative to New York City in the movie. Some of the background music they're playing there, living in the city, no big deal. But outside of that, there's not a whole lot. None of the music really jumped out too much in this one. It's a little by the numbers. It's a little by the numbers.
The darkest side of the night.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
If we had
it
to pick
grows
an
on
actual song, that would be the
you.
winner there.
It grows on you. It's no he's back, but it's all right.
Absolutely. I can jam to that one when it comes on. You know, it's got a slow little something you can like snap your fingers along to, and then it
Yeah,
kind of gets
at the
into it.
start of it, I'm always like, "Oh yeah, what is this stinker of a song?" But then it gets to the main hook, and you're like, "Oh yeah, this is a little bit of a bop." It's a little bit of a good one.
Yeah. Yep. I can throw it on. I can watch some beginning credits to this.
Exactly, exactly.
All right, Chris. I might know what this one is, but what was your favorite quote from the film or your favorite line?
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, that's funny. I want to know what you think mine is, but I've got two. I always want to have an A choice and a B choice, so I'll give my favorite is a whole exchange where they find the guns and they've decided that they're going to hunt Jason and the one character. This is a pure cinema moment here, just peak cinema. One of the characters goes, "What are you taking, Julius?" And he says, "Nothing." It's like him being a badass, and then everyone stares at him like he's a lunatic, and then he goes, "But this gun," and then he picks up a gun and cocks it, and it's like it's so real because it's like he says nothing, like he's gonna have this big epic moment, like he's just gonna fight Jason barehanded, and then everyone like immediately calls him out. They just look at him like, "Are you freaking crazy?" And then he's like, "Except for this gun." I just that like it gets such a big laugh for me every time I watch the movie. Like it's cool, but it's also funny. And for the runner up, I go with there's a scene early in the movie where they're talking about the senior predictions, and McCullough's talking to Wayne, and he goes, you know, the kid, he goes, maybe some of us don't want our futures predicted. And he goes, well, in your case, I'm sure that's true. And it's like a teacher just like roasting the hell out of the nerdy kid. And I don't know. I just thought it was so funny. It's like without missing a beat, he's just roasting this kid. It's like the school year's over. He doesn't have to be nice to any of them anymore. Like, I don't know. As an adult, you can relate to that line a little bit more.
So I was absolutely wrong. I was 0 for 2 on lines that you chose.
Oh, really? What did you think I was going to pick?
I thought you were gonna choose the same one I did, and
Okay.
mine was also from Julius. It wasn't an exchange, but it's a little vulgar. It's they're on the rooftop. Jason grabs him by his shirt, and he's exhausted from things going on in the film, and he goes, "Take your best shot, motherfucker." And I honestly thought we were both gonna be together on
I
that
mean,
one.
that's a great line. I did kind of want to pick one that didn't have an expletive in it, but that's okay. That's okay. I mean, we can this is cool. We can drop the f bombs on this. I'm cool with that. But I almost went with let's find this motherfucker before he finds us. Like I almost went with that one. Like I love that one too. Like he's in a movie that's kind of accused of being a little bland and boring. That is not a boring character. So he's a fun character in this movie, and he has one of the. It's an over the top. Well, I mean, we'll get into it. But he's got some great lines.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying not to swear in our podcast here, but when it's something like that, it's a quote from the film. I'm like, all right, you know what? I'll let myself get away with it just for the quote in the film where.
Yeah, we have to respect the integrity of the movie. We can't be censoring them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if kids are listening, when you get to about the 40-minute mark in this, cover your ears.
Yeah, if kids are listening, don't watch the Friday the 13th movies until you're like a teenager at least.
Oh, that's what I meant. Yeah. All right, I'll go first on scene. I'll let you go on kill since you went first on quote. But my favorite scene, it has to be the rooftop boxing match between Jason and Julius. And I know they said that each take, Kane Hodder was getting punched. It was like 40 some odd times, or like in the low 40s, high 30s, each time. And like that, he was telling Julius, like, hey, like, punch me. Like, he was telling the guy, I can't remember the actor's actual name, but the character of Julius to actually punch him. So like he was taking shot after shot and take after take. And it's just awesome that finally someone stood up to Jason and was like, all right, you know what? He kind of like talked to himself, like visualize and like keep your balance and stuff. And he just started delivering haymakers and did all he could to get away. And in the end it wasn't enough. But I love that he stood up and did what he could. He didn't just continue to run.
Yeah, that would have been a scene that I would have, if you could go back in time and watch a movie in a packed theater, I would have loved to see the audience reactions to that scene. I understand that in the original script, it would have been a scenario where Julius finds himself in Madison Square Garden and he's maybe gloved up just to kind of like experience being in the boxing ring in Madison Square Garden. And then that's where Jason comes in or finds him or has pursued him. And so it would have been a much more of a like in the boxing ring with the boxing gloves on, like him just like living out the dream a little bit and giving Jason his best. And like that would have been a much more kind of theatrical and kind of flashy way of doing it. But this rooftop scene it's kind of stripped down, but it's kind of still very cool. It's got this kind of, it's filmed in profile, kind of like a side scroller video game or a fighting game, so it's like it's got a good visual look to it. And I always like the brief moments in these movies where the characters kind of take it to Jason a little bit and give it their best shot, like the sheriff in part 6, like hitting him with the rock and things like that. And so this is another one of those standout moments where it's like you step up to Jason and you're going to give it your best go. And then, it's just not good enough. If I were to, my favorite scene was actually just the Jason in Times Square, where you're actually getting, the title of the movie, that you're kind of getting your money's worth, the big revolving shot. You see like there's an advertisement for Batman 89 in there. You see all of the stores. He kicks the he kicks the radio of the thugs, and then they all get their knives out, and he turns and he just lifts his mask, and then they all run away. It's a goofy kind of a scene, but it's also kind of like exactly what you paid for when you go to see this movie called Jason Takes Manhattan. So that's the one I went with for my favorite.
Yeah, that I get a little chuckle out of that every time when he like he punks the punks and he lifts it up and they're like, "Yo, man, it's cool," and they all run away, and it's just like, all right, we've seen him in part 8, but like, how much worse can this guy look? And in this one, and we'll get into it, but he, the water didn't do him any favors.
Yeah, I like that. I like that in this. That sort of post part 4-6 that Jason has now got to the point where he'll hold personal grudges against people. He seemed to kind of personally have it out for Tina after a certain point. He's very specifically after these kids who are in the Crystal Lake area and on that boat. And while he's in New York, there's just so many people that he kind of just defaults to like, well, none of these people are really have anything to do with me. So unless they actively confront me, I'm not really going to bother crowds of people. And I'm just going to stay hyper focused on the 2 people I really want to kill. It's a little bit of not that Jason has much of a character, but it's a little bit of an interesting wrinkle that it's like he's laser focused on those 2.
Yeah. And if you don't get in his way, you're not going to have a problem. The diner guy, he kind of steps up to Jason and kind of puts a finger in his face, and he's like, "Oh, well, you're in my way," and he grabs him and launches his ass across the diner. And at the end, the sewer worker guy, he kind of ends up being in the way, helping the kids, and it's just like, if you're not in his way or helping these kids, you're probably going to be okay.
And I like that he's practical. He's after Rennie and Sean, and he could easily kill all of those street punks, but he's a practical man. He's got stuff to do, so he's like, well, how do I get these guys to just run away from me so that I can, I'll kill them later. Let me go focus on who I want to get first. So he just lifts the mask up, and then they all run away. It's a little too much personality. It's a little too goofy, but it's like you can't deny that it's not a fun moment.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. All right. I know that other kill counts of this film said, they included there was like 55 other boat deaths and stuff like that, but I'm going for the 19 that are on screen or shown in the film. So who was your favorite death or death scene in the film?
Oh man, I have 3 I want to talk about. I can never pick just one with these. I got 3 that I really want to talk about. The punch decapitation goes without saying, and we kind of talked about that with your favorite scene. So that's kind of all wrapped in one. I do love that after taking all of those unanswered blows, that Jason just one shot punches his head off. Like, it's the perfect finale to that scene. They say, you come for the king, you best not miss. Well, he steps up to Jason and gives it his best shot, and then Jason just eliminates him with one punch. So I always love that one. I like Eva's strangulation on the dance floor. The editing's kind of hectic and crazy, but specifically the way her lifeless body is thrown at the end and just lands and hits. Apparently that was a pretty difficult thing for that stunt actress to do when she was thrown there, to just throw and not brace your fall or bounce or react when you hit the floor like that. So visually that one was always so striking to me. You can tell that this movie took a few steps to try and work in some deaths that weren't as on-screen grisly. You have like the strangulation or the dumping McCullough into the vat of acid, or Van Dusen dying in the car crash. Some other things to kind of still get away with the kills and get some kills on screen without doing them in a way that would necessarily get them hacked to pieces for the bloodshed. So I liked that strangulation scene.
Of course, Julius is my favorite character. My quote was from him. My scene was from him. So of course my kill has to be from him, right? Right. But yeah, we have talked about that one. The ending scene where we get the quote from Julius, and as a crowd and as a fan watching this, especially I'm sure back in theaters, I'm sure everyone was just like, oh no, like everyone knows what's coming. Like this, he doesn't know. Like Julius has no idea how strong this guy is. He clearly sees that he can take a punch. I mean, you're punching a hockey mask, and from what I've heard and seen in behind the scenes features is, like I said, he was really punching that hockey mask. So like the blood on his knuckles was real in certain takes in the film, where because he actually busted his knuckles hitting the hockey mask.
Oh,
But
yeah.
that's everyone knows what's happening. And then his head comes off and you see it go down, hit the dumpster door closes. So that is my favorite kill of the scene in the film. But I mean, if we're going to talk about like an honorable mention or something, it would have to be the other boxer that Julius defeats, and he's in like the little sauna and he gets the rock right into the chest.
I'm glad you mentioned it, because that was the other one I was going to talk about. The thing that I love most about that kill, and I never really picked up on it, but it's insanely funny to me now, is that Jason walks in, the other guy's got the towel on his head, and he's like, oh, hey, Julius, better luck next time or whatever. That dude thinks that it's Julius in the room with him. The towel never comes off this guy's face. So as far as this guy's concerned, he dies thinking that Julius just murdered him with the rock. like when he gets murdered with the rock, like he's thinking like, oh my gosh, Julius, why are you doing this? Like I don't know why, but that just like is so darkly comedic to me, that he just thinks he was straight up murdered by his boxing buddy.
Absolutely terrible death.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's awful. It's awful. It's a horrible image. But it's like so darkly comedic that he thinks his buddy like whooped his ass in the ring and then comes and kills him in the sauna.
Yeah, there's a couple bad deaths in this film. That one would be absolutely terrible. Drowning in like the sewage waste where he drowned McCullough would be absolutely terrible. That's just disgusting. Especially there's a dead rat floating on top of it. And I mean the gangbangers who kind of dope up Rennie, the one gets the needle all the way through his body, like that would suck. There's just a couple in here that and I also love, like, one of the lines I almost did pick was they were saying that they should find Julius, and the cops like, I'm sure he'll pop up somewhere. They open the car door and his head's sitting right there.
Yeah, that's always a good moment too. The dark comedy moments, with stuff like that. That's always a lot of fun in these movies. You can have some fun with them. The earlier entries are played very straight, and that's good and fine, and they're the stronger films. But when the movies kind of thread that needle of having fun with the concept, it can be really entertaining too. The earlier movies are more good movies that you could actually just watch as films. Then this sort of back half is sort of like they're the house party movies. When you got a couple of friends over, you just want to put on something kind of good and entertaining. Like that's the kind of movies that these are.
Yeah, order a pizza, have some background noise while you play some card games or some drinking games or something. Throw one in the background and have a good time.
Exactly.
What did you think of the new look, the sticky, slimy look of Jason in this film?
So this is where I might have a bit of a hot take. So it as much as I praised the look of him in part seven, people have pointed out that uh, once the mask is off, he kind of looks a little generic decaying zombie, with so much of the skeleton exposed and the finger bones exposed and things like that. And so it's a little not and the clothes are just absolutely in tatters. I do like that this goes back to a more kind of like simplified look. You know, I like the gloves, the sleeves, the shorter sleeves, but just the plain kind of button up shirt and a new mask that's kind of less damage. I do kind of like that simplified look, and I will say that I do love the putrid white sickly skin. I kind of like that. There's just something really unnerving about it. And I mean, we've talked before about how one of my earliest memories of this entire franchise is the acid getting poured on him, and then he rips the mask off, and he's down there in the sewer and like stumbling and chasing them. That's like deep young childhood core memory of Jason right there. So this has always had like a little bit of a soft spot. It gives him this kind of the white look gives him this kind of ghostly vibe to him, and so while it's a simpler design than part seven and not as kind of extravagant or impressive, and I don't like the look of his face specifically when he's unmasked because it just kind of looks like a jack-o'-lantern to me, like kind of like a carved pumpkin or something. But the overall look, like those gloves with the exposed forearms and the kind of constantly wet look and like the sickly white skin, I actually do like that look quite a bit.
Yeah, I agree with you. I was not a when they took his mask off, I was not a fan. Like you said, I never thought of the jack-o'-lantern look, but I'm glad you brought that up that because that is a good way to describe it. I think his eyes look too big in this. I don't know what it is. I just don't like the look of it. He doesn't have teeth. His mouth is like you said, kind of carved like a jack-o'-lantern almost. But I do like how they keep it kind of consistent when we hear him walking. It's like a slushing sound, like he is constantly wet, even
Like,
when he's been out
yeah,
of the water for an hour or
hours.
two. And it doesn't help that he comes out of the water, gets on a boat, and then he gets back into the water to climb onto the Lazarus, and and then during filming and stuff like that, during the night, it's raining outside when he's outside killing some of the students or the
Mhm.
graduates, and then he has to swim all the way to New York, so he's back in the water again. So he's he's very gross in this film.
Yeah, he's completely waterlogged. Like
Yeah.
you get the sense that if you like were to like grab around his forearm and squeeze, that like water would just sponge out of him.
Yeah, it's not one of my favorite looks of Jason, especially considering he got a brand new mask in this, and it still has the hockey or the axe slash
Yeah, it's a,
in the
it's a
corner
replica
of it.
prop. It's clearly a replica prop, of the legend of Jason Voorhees. You gotta, it's only a good replica if they get that axe in there.
This is true, but I do not have, I don't have a problem with this look. There's
Yeah,
really
yeah,
only maybe one film, maybe two, where I have a problem with his look, and this isn't one of them. It's not one of my favorite, but it's something
yeah,
that when I'm watching the film, it doesn't bother me.
yeah. I don't love that he's completely soupy the whole time. Like the wet aesthetic I could do without, and the unmasked look is just kind of like ugly in a bad design way, not ugly in a mongoloid way. And but like in terms of like kind of like the image, when you talk about like the silhouette of these characters or the kind of simple shapes you kind of want them, like he's kind of like Seven has that kind of like, people might call it over designed, the clothes are in tatters and it almost looks like a mummy, and then you've got the bones sticking out at every area, and it's just kind of very, it's just very like there's a lot going on. And this is sort of kind of like a simpler and more pure look. Like this feels more of the next step from part six than part seven does. Like Like part 7 feels like the most degraded version, and this feels a bit more like what he might come out of the water after part 6 looking like. The shirt's a little degraded. He's very wet. The gloves are still there, but they're darkened. That kind of a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure a lot of fans would agree that there's a film coming up where one of the films out of the next 4 that we have is where I am not a big fan of his look, and I'll wait to tell you
Huh.
which one that is until
That's
we get
interesting.
there.
That's interesting. I'm really interested in hearing which one that is.
Could be the next one. It could be 3 down the road. Who knows?
Uh-huh. Well, there's going to be a lot to talk about with the next one. That's for sure. It's definitely a unique entry.
Absolutely, and we will get to that on our next episode. As in, this film was followed by Jason Goes to Hell: The Final Friday, which was theatrically released on August 13th, 1993, which was a couple months before I was born. So we're
Nice.
getting a little more recent here.
I was a year and change, a year and a couple months when that was out.
Well, before we get to that one, what are some final thoughts for you on this one? What do you want to say to people who haven't and have seen it?
Yeah, I mean, look, in for a penny, in for a pound. If you've watched any of these movies or you have a desire to watch any of them, I would say, look, do your due diligence and just watch them all. It's not like there's 30 of them or anything. There's a dozen. It's not that much. They're all quite short. It's a fun one. It's at least one of the ones that stands out with its own concept. It's Jason going to New York, and you get a lot of interesting Jason on a boat sequences, and it's that one. And it's not one of the better entries. It's definitely one of the lower tier ones, but it's one of the movies that if you can't have fun with it, there's at least a lot of moments in the movie where you can have fun, poke fun at it, which also makes it an entertaining viewing experience. So it's definitely worth checking out. It's not great. Kane Hodder gives a great Jason performance, so that's always something worth seeing. He only had 4 performances, and this is one of them, and you get quite a bit of Kane Hodder as Jason screen time in this movie, so it's worth it for that alone as well.
Absolutely. Before I go into my final thoughts, trying to hurry up and get out of here, I almost forgot to go into our rankings to see where we put Friday the 13th Part 8 Jason Takes Manhattan. If you want to take her away.
It would be my pleasure. So, I'll go top or bottom to top here. So, in the number 8 spot, I'll have Part 5 still. I still consider Part 5 to be the weakest. Just above Part 5, well, a lot better than Part 5, but just above Part 5 out of 8 would be Part 8 in the number 7 slot. In the number 6 slot, I would have Part 7. To get into my top 5, down at the bottom of the top 5, I have Part 1. In the number 4 spot, I have Part 3. The third best of the series is Part 2 for me. The final chapter is still the second best, and Jason Lives is still my favorite.
All right, I will get into mine. See, this is where it gets controversial for me, where I struggle. But as of right now, I got Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan in my 8 spot. Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning in my 7 spot. The original Friday the 13th in my 6 spot. Friday the 13th Part 3 in my 5 spot. Friday the 13th Part 2 in my 4 spot. Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter in my number 3 spot. Part 7, The New Blood in my number 2 spot. And just like you, in my number 1 spot is Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives.
I see. I can understand it. Being the longest Friday the 13th movie up to this point is never the accolade that any of the films in this franchise should be going for. I talk about this. Some movies are made to be that sort of short and sweet and simple. And while this is a bigger plot with more going on, these films are still best served being on the short, quick side. And maybe they could have filmed on a few more sets in Vancouver to kind of pad out that New York aspect of the movie a little bit more. But whatever, it's unfortunate. So I can understand putting it at the bottom. Hard for me to put a Kane Hodder Jason performance underneath a movie that doesn't even have Jason in it. But I understand it.
I don't know what it is, but they flip flop for me so much, those two, and it's hard because like my final thoughts on this film are it's fun. Kane Hodder's great as Jason. It's just I think it's some of the characters are very bland for me, but we do get like McCullough is a standout character. Julius is a standout character.
Yeah, you gonna put Julius in the number 8 spot, motherfucker.
I know. Number 5's characters are terrible too.
They're worse than this movie. Ma and retarded Joe or whatever, eating their soup. Like, oh my gosh, like I cannot. It's like that is the worst. That's the low point of the series for me.
I know I need to do better.
That's okay. I'm just gonna. I mean, each to their own. I'm just gonna give you a little bit of crap for it. It's okay. Part 5 still has a little bit of that part 1 through 4 energy. I know what you mean. I know where you're getting at. It still has a little bit of that original vibe to it before the series started to get a little bit more wild and flashy and late 80s. Part 5 still feels early 80s, So I understand it, but for me, part 5 is always going to be, in the bottom.
Well, maybe before we record our next episode, I'll take a quick peek some Saturday night. Or
hey, I'm not peer pressuring. I'm not peer pressuring. Stand by your words, man. Stand by your words.
Well, these are the two I struggle with. I go back and forth between these two for like a bottom spot, and then it as of right now, at least through our first 8 films, number 5 and New Beginning and Jason Takes Manhattan are battling for that bottom spot, and it just depends on what kind of mood I'm in that day, I guess.
Yeah, and like I said, 3, 1, and 7 are kind of in a kind of a juggling position. Different things that some of them do worse, the other ones do better, and vice versa. And the New Line Cinema era of this series is going to be very interesting to talk about because, as a kid, as a kid, you kind of have a natural incline to like whatever the newest entries are. And so, like, as a kid, I just liked the newest ones. I liked the bloodiest ones, so that's what, New Line Cinema was making the ones that were coming out when I was, younger. So to me, like, it was like, oh yeah, these are way better than all those old ones. And then like you get on the internet, you get a little older and you realize that those are some of the most controversial entries in the series. And that some people have some very, very divided takes on the New Line Cinema entries of the series. And so it will be a very interesting discussion to have about those entries.
Absolutely. We got a couple of those, and then, Freddy vs. Jason coming up, the Friday the 13th reboot, which a lot of fans are split on. So with 4 movies left, our ranking lists can go any way between us. We matched pretty well through the first 6, but these next 4 films could divide us or bring us together in a crazy way.
Yeah, it could bring down the whole podcast. Is that what you're saying?
Please don't leave us. We swear it gets better.
Oh man, I'm only joking.
Oh yeah, but we will continue. So thanks, Chris, for joining me. I mean, Jason Takes Manhattan, not the best film in the series, but still fun. It's worth a watch. I put it on every now and again, but it's always fun to have you here talking about some Jason. And once we're done with these, I can't wait to get on to another horror character.
Yeah, these are fun movies to talk about. They're fun movies to kind of sit down and just kind of take in for what they are. These movies don't really hold up any kind of like scare value anymore. They're not really, there's nothing about them that's terribly shocking or scary or thrilling. They're kind of just, they're much more just entertaining these days. And so they're just kind of a fun time to see some slasher vibes.
Yep. See some kills, see some naked chicks, and that's about what these Friday the 13th films are about. So again, Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday, will be our next episode next week. But again, thanks, Chris, for joining me. Thanks to anyone who's out there listening, and until next time.
What are you taking, Julius? Nothing. But this gun.